Thanks for joining us today for the open mic on the TIFF Plus redesign, as you can see on the slide. We're so pleased to be joined today by Eric Fecteau from StatCan, who's the project lead for the TIFF Plus redesign and the TIFF Plus in general. So just before we turn it over to Eric, we'll do a quick land acknowledgement. McMaster University, as the host institution for the Canadian Research Data Center Network, is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. We begin our session today by giving honor and thanks to the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations, and to recognize our responsibility to respect and honor the intimate relationship Indigenous peoples have to this land. Visit Native Land Digital, a space where people can learn more about the lands they inhabit, the history of those lands, and how to actively be a part of a better future going forward together. And with that, I'll just remind everyone that we're going to keep video off while Eric is presenting. Once Eric has presented, the Q&A session is open. That's why we're in a meeting format. And at that point, you can feel free to come on video, unmute, and ask your questions. But just while Eric is speaking, I'll ask that we not sort of all try to pop up on his screen with our videos. Over to you, Eric.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I will start the presentation. So yes, today we're going to talk about the TIFF Plus redesign. I'm Eric Fecteau from Statistics Canada. A bit of an overview of the presentation today. So we'll go over what the databases in question are. So the TIFF, APIM, LAD, and TIFF Plus. A bit of context around why this redesign and what we've been doing for the redesign. Some changes and advantages of the redesign. So the what is going to be impacted and what's going to be improved and all of that, and the impacts on timeline for the 2024 reference year, because of the redesign. So databases. Let's start with the T1 family file. So the TIFF, also or T1FF, is a database of T1 tax filers grouped together into census families with non-filing children and spouses. The TIFF publishes approximately 40 tables on the StatCan website, and custom tables are available upon request for various other types of data analysis. The TIFF is a source of data that is frequently integrated with surveys and other administrative data sources at StatCan. The Longitudinal Administrative Data Bank, the LAD, is a longitudinal file designed as a research tool on income, and it contains a limited number of demographic characteristics also. The LAD is a 20% longitudinal sample, so a random 20% of filers from the T1 family file, so the previous file we just saw, and then their families. The random nature of the sample selection is important for the representativeness of the population. The LAD can be integrated with surveys and administrative data sources as Statistics Canada, but as a 20% sample, it's primarily used as for comparison group analysis or residual group analysis. And then this one, the last one of the three, is the Administrative Personal Income Master File, also called APIM. It's a comprehensive source of income data generated from tax returns and associated tax slips. So here the big difference with the TIFF, for example, is the addition of tax slips, many tax slips. APIM data is primarily used to integrate income information with surveys and other administrative data sources at Statistics Canada. The mandate of APIM is not to publish tabulated data directly, mostly for data integration. So we just went over three sources that sound fairly similar to one another. APIM starts in 2016, focuses on personal income data. The TIFF, 1982, starts in, and it's mostly, there is definitely personal income data, but focuses on family income data and detailed geography. So where do people live? And then the LAD is the longitudinal aspect. this is where the TIFF Plus or the TIFF redesign comes in. It's where instead of having 2.5 data sets created separately at StatCan, we're going to create a one process flow where we start, the TIFF Plus is going to start with personal income data, so a little bit like APIM right now. And that data is going to flow into what we call the TIFF now, but mostly focused on census, family, and household data and detailed geography. And then that's going to roll into the LAD for the longitudinal data. So the LAD is going to become a 20% sample of the TIFF Plus, with some questions still around exactly the proportion. But it's going to be sourced from the TIFF Plus. A little bit of context. So what have we been doing in the past bit, and what are we planning on doing? So some of the phases. So in 2024, 2025, so the calendar year, not calendar year, the fiscal year, so April 2024 to March 2025, we focused on exploration, evaluation, and consultation. This was the phase for doing this. We did intensive consultation with internal and external users about how do they use the TIFF. We'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide, but how do they use the TIFF? How do they use APIM? How do they use the LAD? Exactly how they do all of those things. And then we did a lot of exploration of various concepts and what would be possible. How could we modify? We knew we had two data sources that did fairly similar things. And the question was, well, how can we get that into a one data source flow? For 2025, 2026, what we're currently in, or about halfway in, is the development phase. So we're doing a significant data exploration. We're creating the specifications for new modules, for new ways of doing these things. And we'll talk about these things in the presentation, but it's mostly focused around that kind of work. And we're continuing user consultation. So for example, today's a perfect time for user consultation. We love hearing feedback, comments, questions, anything like that. We'll have an email address at the end, but this is a part of this consultation. Is we want to hear how people use the data and what they hope to see, or if they have any particular aspect that they have issues with currently that could be improved. So once this development phase ends, we enter the production phase in approximately April 2026 to March 2027, where very early on to that period, we're going to have an internal prototype of the TIFF Plus for exploration, documentation, and validation of the data. And we're going to start implementing it in our production system. And then in the end, it's going to be production of the microdata. We'll go over the timelines and all of that in a separate slide. So a bit about consultation. So we did internal consultation for APIM, TIFF, and LAD users at various levels. I believe we did 3 rounds of consultation, one fairly high level and then some fairly deep ones. The first, or one of them, discussed the variable levels. So we kind of asked all of our internal users, and we have many, who uses which variable and why. We haven't, we'll talk about that, but we have over 1,000 variables, and we mapped a little bit of how are people using each and what variables they're using. We also did some consultation at the concept level. We discussed about various aspects like the marginalized population, students, for example, immigrants, etc. Deceased individuals, how do people work with deceased individuals in their data? Children, especially children who don't file taxes, and those types of analysis to really understand how people are using our data and to make sure that how we're building the TIFF Plus works for our clients. We've also been doing rounds of external consultation with clients that either use the TIFF, APIM, or LAD frequently, or who have interest in using the TIFF Plus in the future. this included. And the consultation is ongoing. We're in development. It's the perfect time to give feedback, etc. So let's talk a little bit about what are the changes and what are the advantages of this redesign. So the TIF plus population, that's going to be one of the main focus of the redesign, is an expansion of the population universe to include all fiscally active individuals and their family. So what is fiscally active? So we'll include in the database any individual who filed their taxes, similar to how we do it on the TIF currently, or any individuals who received a tax slip. So anybody that did a T4, T4E, T4A, T4RSP, T5, and many, many others, anybody who had any slips, any what we call fiscal activity, will be included in the database. We'll also include all of their dependents. So based off of the federal child benefit, or spouses based off of the information. For example, on the front page of the T1, there's information about your spouse. These individuals will be included. So the core is all families with a member who is fiscally active. They're the whole family, as much as we can know that they are a family or that they are together, will be included. So the impact, like I mentioned earlier, the impact on the LAD population is still to be assessed. Currently, the LAD is 20% of the TIF. Since we are adding quite a large population, there has to be some exploration, some significant exploration into how that impacts the LAD. Here's a bit of a rough overview of what this TIF plus population will be. So in, I don't know, pink, orange-ish in the middle is the T1 filers. This is our biggest population. These are the people who filed their taxes. In that, most of we also have information about the parents on the federal child benefit information. So that's generally the filers. And then the next largest population is the children in greenish. We have about 7 million children that aren't tax filers that we add to the data. And here's partially what we're adding. Depending on the exact sources, we're mostly adding about 4 million individuals who come from tax slips. These individuals, and we'll see this in, I believe, the next slide, will get their record imputed. So we'll have some information from their slips, and we'll pass them through some imputation to provide them some information based off of those who do file taxes, for example. And then we have, similar to how the TIF currently works, we have approximately 300,000 individuals who are imputed spouses. These are individuals who did not file a T1, did not receive any slips, but we know of their existence, of their being in families based off of various other information in the tax data. Imputation. So we're also going to improve data quality through a more detailed verification and imputation. We're going to do some careful detection of outliers and quality indicators for users. So we'll provide some quality indicators for users and do some outlier detection. We're going to impute information for individuals, like I mentioned, with tax slips, but who did not file a tax return. So this is already being done on APIM quite successfully and used quite frequently at StatCan. But we'll bring this into the TIF plus. Same methodology as we are very comfortable with already. And we're going to also improve data quality, exploration, and data correction in the process. For the variables in concept, we're going to increase the accuracy of certain government transfers thanks to having access to either directly the data through the slips or better or higher quality data from the slips for us to be able to estimate these government transfers. We'll be able to, we'll also adjust the number of variables available or /processed currently the TIFF processes over 1,000 variable. This has a ton of duplication and some concepts that are not used by anybody that takes some time, some analytical and some processing time to understand and process that nobody ever uses. The TIFF Plus is going to focus more on about a set of 300 variables. We're going to focus on the main income concept, so pretty much anything that bubbles up into total income, or some demographic concepts like gender, age, geography, etc. The concepts that are available outside of StatCan, so in our publications or in the RDC, will remain like generally available. We don't provide 1,000 variables to the external users. We provide a much smaller set, and that set will be generally remaining available. For the geography of the TIFF and the LAD is based on the postal code currently. This we're revamping, and the geography of the TIFF Plus will be based directly on the address itself as much as possible. So we'll have a much better defined and more accurate low-level geography. Right now, since we publish using census geography, postal codes don't fit in census geographies. They're two separate systems. And so the boundaries of these are kind of rough based off of the postal code. The address itself is going to solve a lot of this by being able to place the person right into their census geography at whatever level we need. This does mean that the postal code will be, it will still be available, but postal geography, such as postal cities, urban routing areas, and rural communities will no longer be published generally. We're going to be focusing on, like the rest of StatCan, on census geographies. For households, because we have a more precise address, we will be exploring the possibility of creating households also. The household will be an analytical unit that groups together families. So a family or multiple families can be within the same household, based off of the mailing address provided by CRA. Similar to families, the concept of household may differ slightly from that used on the census due to the source of information. For example, our information is not, hey, do you live here? It's, you tell CRA that this is your mailing address. So the information is slightly different, collected differently, and based off of some methodology. We'll also be redesigning the publication. We're going to create new web tables with new information, and some of them with improved population coverage. Some tables will definitely remain historically comparable to our previously published data, or we will be publishing longer series to account for this. There's going to be a new technical reference guide for the TIFF Plus also, and new data dictionary for the TIFF Plus and for the LAD. The new vetting rules will also be created and applied for the data confidentiality. But most of the vetting rules, for example, for the TIFFs in the RDC, are provided by other teams than ourselves and should remain similar. This will mostly help us be able to publish data slightly differently and hopefully at a higher level, at a lower level of geography or at various more information. Modernization. So generally this whole project is modernization, but we're focusing on modernizing some very specific aspects. We're going to be modernizing our modules on the family, the geography, the government transfers, and the edits and imputation that we currently do on the TIFF and on APIM. We're also going to be modernizing some of the technical aspects and some of the decisions made over the past 40 years. The TIFF is 40 years old, 1982, more than 40 years old now. 1982 is the first publication year. I'm not sure exactly when it started getting created, but some of the decisions are quite old. For example, the phone number. The phone number is used in the process of family creation. 10, 20, 30 years ago, having a phone number with a spouse was more common than it is today. It may be that today having a phone number in common with your spouse is a really, really good indicator of being together, because this would be very rare. So this is probably still a very important characteristic, but it may be less important in some other aspects. So this is not necessarily to say, oh, well, all of it's going to change. It's more, well, we need to rethink some of these things as society has changed. The concept of a family and how families interact have changed. We'll also do some modernization of the LAD processing system itself. Impacts on timelines. So the TIFF Plus data release for the 2024 reference year will be delayed 6 to 8 months, from spring 2026 to winter 2027. The census family and the small area geography will be available on the TIFF Plus in early 2027 for both 2024 and 2025 data. So in other words, we're delaying the reference year 2024 for what we currently call the TIFF, but we're going to provide the 2025 quickly in succession quickly after we publish the 2024. Ultimately meaning that the 2025 data will be early, and then every cycle moving forward will be earlier than we currently do. There are still some questions around some of the files we need to use, but in all scenarios, the TIFF data, the family and household aspect and geography aspect, is going to be published earlier than it was currently on a yearly basis. The release of the 2024 reference year LAD data will also be delayed 4 to 6 months, as it will use the TIFF Plus as its source. But once again, this file is expected to be provided earlier than it currently is moving forward. You can see this little table down here where reference year 2024 is delayed, but the reference 2025 and the regular schedule moving forward is expected to be earlier. APIM itself, because it feeds into other important surveys at StatCan, won't be delayed through this period. So the individual data will be available on schedule the whole period. Some future perspective. So we will have relevant data, so this income data, earlier in the year. The FFT1 Plus is a lot more agile than the FFT1, the TIFF. I realize it's still a French term. The TIFF, the T1FF Plus will be more agile than the TIFF itself was, and allow us the ability to respond more quickly to change. It was quite hard, for example, to change based off of the various new COVID benefits, for example. And these kind of modifications, this modernization that we're doing, is going to allow us to be a lot more flexible for these kind of things. It will also allow us to add improvements or do improvements on the TIFF Plus data easier in the future. The code base will be less frozen. It'll be much more agile and allow us to do updates over time and improve it. Overall, the TIFF Plus is going to be a single source of administrative microdata at StatCan on the income of individuals, families, and households. It's going to be the administrative source of truth on income data. And these concepts will align with the StatCan standards for various things on geography, on income, etc. As I mentioned multiple times in the presentation, if you have any questions, please do send us an email, questions, comments, anything related to this presentation or to the redesign. I think it's a perfect time if ever there is a time to discuss this, because we're deep in the data, deep into the exploration. So it's the perfect time for any of these forms of comments. That's all I have today.
Great, thanks so much, Eric. And thank you, Dominique, for putting the email into the chat where it will be a little easier for people to grab. It's one of those classic StatCan emails. I'm going to take Chair's prerogative to ask a question that you might not know the answer to off the bat. We have a bunch of data sets now in the RDCs that are linked to the T1FF. Is the plan to replace those linkages with the new T1FF plus eventually over time, or are we going to leave the linked data the way they are now, and sort of new linked data sets will be linked to the T1FF plus?
Yeah, so it'll depend on each project, but if they want to continue linking to tax information, the TIFF Plus is going to be the source for that. We do plan on doing some aspect, especially with the LAD, some aspect of longitudinality to it. Therefore, they could always link to the more longitudinal aspect of it, so that it isn't a massive change, like all of a sudden everything gets renamed, for example. So yeah, the idea is that they can, if they were linking to either APIM historically or the TIFF historically, they can now link to the TIFF Plus, and it should be a fairly seamless. We're keeping, at least internally, we're keeping similar methods of integration, and it should be fairly similar.
Okay, great. Is there any publicly available resources to read more about the changes, or to get more details?
We plan on definitely publishing this kind of things. They're not out yet. We're still really in the deep of the exploration, and once decisions have been made, we'll be definitely publishing things. At the very end, we'll also update all of the documentation online to match this new system and how we created all of that.
Okay, so at this point, we'll open it up to the audience. If you want to put your hand up or come off mute and just ask your question, the chat's good too. Whatever you feel like doing. I know there's a lot of researchers in the audience who worked with the LAD and have worked with the T1 in the past, and I'm sure they have good questions. Or you've explained everything perfectly and they have no the other alternative. Sometimes that happens. Okay, I have a hand from Julie Farmer. Julie, you should be able to come off mute. Looks like you are. Oh no, yeah, you are. But we don't hear you.
Can you hear me?
We do now.
Yep.
Hey, sorry, I was already talking, but yeah, thank you for the presentation. It's interesting to see the files available and how the T1FF Plus will enhance some of the information about tax data. I'm just wondering if you could explain, you know, the diagram where you had the peach colored bubble, and there's about 4 million children through the federal child benefits. I think that's one. And then you have 7 million children outside of that. So I'm wondering if, just for my learning, if you could explain who those 7 million people are and why they're not linkable.
The children?
Yeah, the 7 million. So are they people who there are no benefits, like they're not flagged in the tax data at all right now, so they're
What I meant was that they aren't tax filed. Like, for example, let's take a 2-year-old. They aren't a tax filer. They don't receive any tax slips themselves. If they receive anything, generally their parents will receive it. But we do know of their existence through the federal child benefits. So just because they're on the side here and they're not like part of the tax universe, they are. We do know about them from tax information given to their parents. So the child tax benefit information, various other aspects, and we have some information such as their age, gender, or various other small things. So we do have an amount. We also have this is truer now, but we have potential integration information that we can add to the data that we plan on probably adding to the data based off of some exploration we have to do still.
Okay, so with a T1 tax filer, those 7 million children are kind of can be linked to them right now, or like
their parents.
identified right now if their parent is a filer. Okay, I was just wondering that you only had the 4 million children in the tax file, but okay.
Oh, the 4 million are parents, are generally, these are the parents of these children. Not all of them, but yeah, this is, sorry, the little gray box is generally tax filing parents and their information.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect.
Do we have other questions from the crowd? I think I'll say that we're probably collectively a little bit disappointed that the data are going to be later this year. It'll be nice to have them a little more timely in future years. So big props for that.
Yes, I agree. As somebody who is on this project temporarily and is a user of the TIFF, I'm happy to have the data earlier or later when I go back to my substantive position.
Dominique.
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation, Eric. So I work with Eric on this Diff Plus, and so one of the reasons why we have to delay the release is to ensure that we're doing things properly. This is the kind of redesign that we don't want to rush, and most of the team that we're working on regular production are actually involved in this redesign. So it was a hard, really tough choice to make, but I think it's just it's for the better, and unfortunately it doesn't impact, and that's partly why we're trying to do a somewhat of a big outreach, is to make sure that people are aware, that they let us know if this has an impact that is challenging for their programs, and that we are there to support if we can do anything, and we'll help them be in contact with appropriate people if need be. So I think we're aware that this is unfortunate, but at the same time we just have to be realistic that it needs time to do something, a product that's going to be good quality.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Dominique.
So I guess is there plans to add more stuff into this mix, or is it really going to just be the core 3 files for the future? Like, are we going to see census linkages to this data? Like, is that?
It's done generally the other way around. For example, the income information on the census comes currently from APIM. So it's generally people bring their own source of information, like immigrants or the students in the RDC, the ELMLP provides a TIFF population for the students. So it's generally the other way around, that you bring in your own population, then add the income information to them. Go ahead, Dominique.
So I think if the idea is because the idea of bringing the census into the mix would be to bring characteristics, right? And so the detailed characteristics of the census are usually only for 25% of households that are on the census. So it limits us in terms of what the pertinence, or I can't remember what the word is, the relevancy to actually include that in our world. That being said, these projects linking various files with the TIFF Plus are ongoing, and it's just not something we're going to do by default, because the plus value is not generic enough so that we can do that. There's and again, as Eric mentioned, the goal is to have a tool that's relatively agile so that we can add on top as we get more files available. And I can think of a few examples that we're going to want to explore, like the immigration file. So we know that within StatCan, there's an immigration file that comes in. There's a longitudinal database, the immigration database that's created using some of the, I'm going to say the IRCC, the Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada. And we know that that's available. So that's something that we will explore. And so there are things like that we will explore. And by adding currently the system is fairly rigid, and by having something that's a little more flexible, as we progress and we do more development, then we'll be able to consider adding more things. So I say that, but I mean, if there are comments or there are specific files that are of interest that would benefit the full population, we can certainly look into, one, do we have it at StatCan, and second, if it would be relevant for us.
Yeah, I think I maybe misspoke a little bit saying link the census. It's more about, are we planning to bring the T1 into the census rather than the census to the T1 is the 25%, right? But it does massively improve the usefulness of the income data for the census to have, the full tax filer rather than just the income from last year.
So your cat's having fun.
Pesky cat, right? Try to ignore.
So maybe what I will say is that the census is a different tool, but like it's a box on its own, and we have very little impact on them. I know that they're investigating, adding a few things here and there, but it's a different environment, and the goal is a little different than what the TIF Plus is.
And to add to that, it's not just adding new files, but improving quality all over the places is something that we already have, like a list of, well, after this redesign, what do we want to continue adding or continue improving? For example, individuals who provide PO boxes. Well, there may be ways of figuring things out for these individuals. So like this is already a reality on the TIF and on APIM, the PO box situation. But there are potential ways we can solve it in the future. It's more it's improvements, and now that the system allows us to do these types of improvements in a much easier way, we'll be able to explore these types of things.
Well, we don't like to keep people if there's no further questions. If someone, Dominique has put the email address into the chat there. That's for feedback. Is there one that people can ask questions to? Is it the same mailbox?
Same one, yeah.
Okay, so if something occurs to you in the middle of the night, make sure you have that email address saved so that you can ask the team. Okay, so before we go, I'm just gonna do a quick rundown. We've got 3 events coming up in November. We have the FNIGC Fundamentals of OCAP Introduction. It's not the full course, it's just a quick 1-hour webinar to kind of get your bearing within OCAP and ask some questions and learn a little bit about Indigenous data governance. The one after that is that we're hosting the chair of the Canadian Statistical Advisory Council, Howard Ramos, who's going to present the council's sort of report for this year. And we can ask questions of him. And then the first week in December, and I just finalized it yesterday, we're going to have an open mic like we had today on the rental market survey, which is a CMHC database. So anyone interested in housing, I know that's kind of a new area of data for the RDC. So if you know housing researchers, make sure to forward that invite to them so that they can come and get informed. Last call for questions. All right, I hope everyone has a lovely Thanksgiving and a great weekend. We'll see you all next time.
Thanks.